You're still stuck with porn because you've been given the wrong model for how to quit. And I don't just mean outdated, I mean completely off. Most recovery patterns out there are based on addiction thinking. I worked with both men and women with strong values and real goals who still cannot break the habit. Not because they're weak, but because they've been using methods that never address the real problem. Let me be clear, some of these addiction-based ideas might seem helpful on the surface. They sound tough, they sound serious, but they keep you stuck in the cycles of pressure, shame, and relapse. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 6 failure patterns that come from the addiction model and why they don't work. And you might be thinking, well, what about accountability apps? Don't they help? I'm going to cover that too and explain why they're part of the problem, not the solution. So stay with me. Before we get into those 6 failed recovery methods, let's clarify something important. As I said, most poor recovery advice out there is built on the addiction mindset. But here's the truth, even the scientific community hasn't reached a consensus on whether porn addiction as clinical diagnosis even exists. What I do recognize is something called compulsive sexual behavior disorder, which is different. It's not addiction, it's a behavioral disorder. Even so, many people feel like their porn use is out of control, and I don't admit that, but we have to be careful about the language we use. When we label ourselves as addicts, it shapes how we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves shapes what we believe we're capable of. If you believe addiction is something permanent, something you cannot change, that belief can quietly kill your motivation. It makes you think you already lost control, that your brain is broken, that change is impossible. And for most people, that's just not true. Most people who struggle with porn are not living non-functional lives. They're working jobs, showing up for relationships, doing the best they can, but still dealing with an emotional and behavioral loop they've never been taught to break. So I'm not here to tell you what to call it. If the word addiction helps you, keep it. But if calling yourself an addict makes you feel stuck, ashamed, or powerless, you have permission to drop it. There's a big difference between the addiction mindset and the growth mindset. Addiction mindset says your behavior is fixed, that you're stuck this way, that you're destined to keep struggling. Growth mindset says nothing is permanent. You can change. You can retrain your brain. You're not broken. You're learning. And once you shift into that mindset, everything changes. So with that in mind, let's look at the 6 failed recovery patterns that keep people trapped in the addiction mindset. Let's start with the first failed recovery pattern, suppression tactics. This is the approach most people are taught when they try to quit. You feel an urge and the goal becomes to fight it, avoid it, or get rid of it as quickly as possible. So you rely on strategies like no-fap, cold showers, or dopamine detoxes. The more you try to suppress or avoid the urge, the more you reinforce the idea that the urge is dangerous or wrong, something you need to escape. And that's the real problem. Suppression doesn't teach your brain how to process emotional energy behind the urge. It teaches your brain that the urge is a threat. So now your nervous system treats it like something to brace against. Over time, that tension builds. You're spending energy holding back what your body has been conditioned to expect. And eventually that energy has to go somewhere. That's why so many people feel like they relapse out of nowhere. It's not random, it's a pressure system. Even something like mindfulness can get misused here. If you're only meditating to make the urge go away, you're still operating from fear. You're trying to outsmart the urge instead of letting your brain learn that it's safe to feel it. What works instead is learning to relate to the urge differently, not as something you have to fight, but as something you can notice without reacting. When you do that, your brain stops linking the trigger to the old reward. The loop starts to break. This is what it means to retrain your brain, not to control it, not to shut it down, but to give it a new pattern to follow. That's what makes the urge lose power. Not discipline, not fear, just clarity and practice. Another common recovery approach is substitution. This is when you try to replace porn with something healthier. You feel an urge coming on, so you hit the gym, you play music, you take a walk, you call a friend, maybe you throw yourself into a new hobby. And at first glance, it seems like a win. You're not using porn, you're doing something productive instead. But underneath that behavior, the logic is the same. The feeling is uncomfortable, so I need to escape it. You're still reacting to the emotion as something bad. You're still teaching your brain that discomfort should be avoided. All you've done is swap the outlet. The surface behavior looks different, but the emotional pattern stays exactly the same. That's why so many people feel like they're making progress, but still don't feel free. They're controlling urges, but they haven't changed the emotional relationship with those urges. So the loop quietly continues. Every time you feel boredom, stress, loneliness or pressure, your brain still looks for a way out. That's the conditioning. The trigger may shift, but the nervous system response hasn't changed. The goal isn't to run from discomfort into something more socially acceptable. What actually changes the pattern is learning how to experience emotion without immediately reacting. To feel it, name it, sit with it, and not need to escape. That's the skill, and it's not about being tough or disciplined. It's about emotional maturity. It's about understanding the difference between having a feeling and acting on one. When you start to feel something uncomfortable and you don't flinch, distract, or compensate, your brain starts learning that this feeling isn't dangerous. That it's okay to stay present. That you don't need a reward to survive a moment of discomfort. That's how the pattern breaks. It isn't about resisting porn or distracting from it. It's about no longer needing it. Substitution keeps you dependent on escape, but emotional resilience is what finally gives you freedom. This one might feel familiar, especially if you come from a religious background, or if you spend years hearing that porn use is cheating, betrayal, or a sign of moral failure. The idea behind shame-based model is that if you feel bad enough, you stop. If you're scared enough, guilty enough, disgusted enough with yourself, maybe you change. But that's not how real change works. And deep down, you probably felt this for yourself. Shame doesn't build accountability. It builds identity damage. When you frame your porn use as evidence that you're broken, impure, or unworthy, every slip becomes a personal attack on your self-worth. And the more broken you feel, the harder it is to show up in your life. With your partner, your faith, your goals, so you start to isolate, you withdraw from God, from others, and from yourself. And in that isolation, you start craving relief. So you use porn to escape the very shame that porn created. It's not just an emotional spiral, it's a neurological one. Your brain starts to associate shame with the need for soothing. And over time, the shame itself becomes a trigger. This is why guilt-heavy, fear-driven programs usually backfire. They might create short-term urgency, but long-term, they reinforce the very emotions that drive the behavior. What works instead is the exact opposite of what shame tells you. Shame says your brain is broken because of porn. Real recovery says this is a habit your brain learned and it can unlearn that habit. You need a system that helps you heal your relationship with yourself, not tear it down. That means learning how to relate to urges without moral panic. It means understanding your sexuality through the lens of values and emotional maturity, not fear or repression. It means knowing that slip-ups are feedback, not identity statements. When you remove the shame, you remove the fuel from the cycle. That's when quitting starts to feel less like a moral test and more like a real, doable path forward. This next one trips up almost everyone. You try to stop watching porn by managing your environment. You install blockers, set up filters, join accountability groups, maybe even use apps to track your streaks or flag when you sleep. Most people reach for these things first, and I get it. It feels like you're finally taking your habits seriously. You locking down your environment, making it harder to sleep, maybe getting someone to hold you accountable. But here's the truth most people don't hear. You cannot solve an internal loop with external control. App blockers might reduce access, but they don't retrain your brain response. They don't touch the part of you that's been conditioned to reach for porn when you feel overwhelmed, stressed, bored, anxious, or disconnected. And when you hit those internal triggers, the real drivers of your habit, the craving still fights. Nothing changed. That's why these tools feel strong at first, but collapse under pressure. You managing behavior, but not transforming the over-desire behind it. And here's the part no one talks about. Most of these tools are incredibly easy to bypass. I had clients, and even I did this myself back in the past, literally code through accountability apps. They got so good at breaking the rules they created, it just became another version of the game. Block, bypass, block, bypass. So what's the result? You end up exhausted, frustrated, burned out from constantly trying to outsmart your brain. Now don't get me wrong, these tools can be great for kids or as a short-term boundary when you build the internal skill set. But if you're an adult who can think your way past the filter, they're not a long-term solution. And let's be honest, you cannot run from porn forever. It always be there. It's on your phone, it's in the algorithms, it's in the ads, the feeds, and the culture. It isn't like alcohol where you can stop going to the bar and avoid it entirely. Sexual stimuli are everywhere, so try to stay clean by avoiding access. It's like playing a whack-a-mole with your triggers. One pops up, you smash it, another pops up, you chase that. Meanwhile, the loop inside you keeps running. Here's what I tell my clients. Using blockers and filters is like building a fence around a wild horse. You build that fence to stay safe, you reinforce it. You double the locks, but every time the urge breaks through, you back at square one. You panic, you scramble to build it stronger, and the next day the horse comes back. That's willpower, that's accountability software, that's fence building. Now there's another approach. You can learn to train the horse. That takes more courage to front. You get kicked a little, you mess up, but over time the horse becomes less wild, less reactive. You understand it, you work with it, and eventually it just walks beside you, calm, familiar, unthreatening. Something you know how to handle. That's what rewiring your brain actually looks like. Instead of fighting the craving every day, you remove the mechanism that created it. Instead of reacting to urges in the moment, you make decisions ahead of time. You know what to expect, you know how to feel it, and you know how to respond. That's the kind of freedom these tools can never give you. So if you ever said, I try everything, and all you try is another app or another filter, let me just say this. You haven't failed. You just haven't been shown how to work from the inside out. Let's talk about one of the most misleading ideas in this space, that understand your triggers is enough to change them. I see this all the time. People spend months, sometimes years, uncovering their childhood trauma, dissecting their relationship with their parents, naming all the reasons why they turn to porn. And don't get me wrong, that kind of awareness is incredibly valuable. It gives you language, it helps you make sense of your story. It might even give you a little bit of relief like, that's why I do this. But here's the part most people miss. Insight isn't the same as transformation. You can understand why you reach for porn and still reach for it. You can connect the dots perfectly but still feel the urge, feel the unwanted emotions, and go right back to the old loop. That's because insight works in the mind, but the craving doesn't just live in the mind, it lives in the body. It's not just cognitive, it's somatic. is pattern. You train your nervous system to associate certain emotions with a specific reaction. And until you go to that layer, the felt layer, and start retraining how your body holds, responds to, and processes emotion, that loop will keep firing. So if you ever said, I understand where it comes from, why can't I stop? That is why. You're doing deep work, but it's only mental. And mental work alone won't change a pattern condition response. You need a system that doesn't just explain your past. It helps you unhook your identity from your porn use, so your urges don't feel like a reflection of who you are. You need tools that slow down your automatic reactions, so you can feel an urge without obeying it. That's what gives you real space to heal. Let's talk about one of the most seductive traps in recovery, the motivation-based model. It sounds empowering. Set big goals, visualize your future, raise to your highest potential, chase purpose, become the best version of yourself. And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with any of that. Ambition is a beautiful thing. Wanting more for your life is part of what makes you human. But here's where this model falls apart. Motivation doesn't rewire the craving. It might lift you for a day or a week. It might spark some effort, give you a burst of inspiration, or have you make a bold promise to yourself. But when the urge hits, when shame creeps in, when you're alone at night, and your body is tense and your brain starts looping, motivation doesn't show up for you. You feel the pressure of that ideal self you're trying to become, but your nervous system is still trained for escape. Your identity hasn't caught up. The loop is still running, so you sleep, and then the shame spiral starts all over again. It's not that your goals were not big enough. It's that you didn't have the tools to build a foundation underneath them. So instead of feeling inspired, you feel like a failure. You start to believe, maybe I'm just not meant for that version of myself. Maybe I don't have what it takes. But that's not true. You're not broken. You just running a vision without a system. And purpose without process will always collapse under pressure. That's why what you actually need is a daily practice, not of motivation, but of emotional skill. A way to process urges, sit with discomfort, and respond to your internal world with curiosity instead of panic. A space where your identity can start to shift from the guy who keeps messing up to the person who knows how to feel an urge without obeying it. That's what makes the future feel believable again. That's what builds self-trust. And when that foundation is in place, your goals stop being this high-pressure escape fantasy. They start becoming your real life. So all the recovery patterns I mentioned don't actually lead to real sustainable progress toward quitting porn. I actually break down one of the most important skills that you can implement right now to help you rewire your brain and change your porn habit at the root. This skill will help you process a porn urge, especially when you have a really strong one, without relying on suppression or avoidance. Finally understand what real progress toward quitting porn actually looks like, and measure your achievement in a way that leads to lasting freedom, not by obsessively accounting your clean days, but with growth mindset. I'll show you how in the next video. Click to watch now.